that we have growth of around 1%, but if you go back further south, it's really looking quite bad, so there needs to be something done. And we're looking at, for instance, things like the single market, which has been a very, very big success for Europe over the last 20 years since its inception. And looking at, is there small things that we can do in order to make trade flow even more smoothly than it has done before. Look at my country. Our largest export market is Germany, the second largest is Sweden, the third largest is the UK, and the fourth largest is the US. So if our businessmen can just have a little bit better advantages in these markets, and this is the same for all other European countries, they export as you do. The states here export to their neighbor states, basically and mainly. If that can be changed, you can actually do a lot. Then we're looking at another area, green growth. We believe in that. In Denmark, we have been through a green revolution, where we are now one of the most energy efficient countries in Europe and in the world. We have increased our exports on green tech to 13% of our exports, and we believe that looking at Europe and going through the same motions as we and other Nordic countries have done, you can actually do a lot in that area as well. We are looking at, for instance, an energy efficiency directive that would improve energy efficiency by 20% by 2020. Commission has calculated if you do that, you can actually create 2 million jobs in Europe. So there's a lot to gain there as well. But the answer is, short answer is yes, we are looking very much at the other side of the coin and trying to also find ways to become competitive again and create growth.
Yeah, I would say that I think we have worried about this vicious sort of fiscal consolidation cycle. If your country loses market access, you have no choice but to undergo fiscal consolidation. I don't think we're trying to deny that reality, although I do think that with support from the rest of the Eurozone, the pace of that consolidation can be extended, and I do think it's important to have ambitious targets, but ones that are also realistic. And I think the other concern is that not all of the Eurozone has lost market access. There are still countries that do have fiscal space and are able to borrow at very, very low rates, if in real terms actually negative rates, and yet so they in the minimum could slow the pace of their fiscal consolidation. And it would be nice to see Germany, I think, instead of sort of doing fiscal consolidation in solidarity with their southern neighbors, as they said, it would be. I think we actually would rather see them do structural reforms in solidarity with their southern neighbors. I think German liberalization of their service sector could be the single biggest benefit to Southern Europe. But the reality is these economies are going to have to export their way out of this crisis. And who are they going to export to? To Germany, to their biggest trading partners right there in Europe. And so that domestic demand in the northern part of Europe is going to be very important for their ability to grow their way out of this. I think we just, fiscal consolidation alone is not going to get you out of this, and I would agree. I think Krugman has highlighted it very well, and I think Italy is also a case study. Italy ran primary surpluses for 17 years, from 1992 to 2008, and were only able to get their debt to GDP ratio from 120 to 100. 17 years, 20% points of GDP. I think Italy shows that when you don't have growth, you're not going to get the debt ratios down to the levels that you want to get them down. I mean, Italy deserves credit for actually running very prudent fiscal policies for almost 2 decades. Their problem is growth, not because they were fiscally profligate for in the run up to the crisis.
I'm curious. There seems to be a lot of lecturing of the Greeks about their cooked books and so forth, and yet the bankers who made those loans, I can't believe some of them weren't aware of this, but as far as they were getting their money up front, they didn't care too much about 5 or 10 years later. What's being done to really deal with that, particularly given the problem that you have the banks just like here too large to fail, and they know that, so what is to prevent them from this happening a few years from now?
Either of you want to take that?
Well, I mean, I think, I think the global crisis, there's a recognition that, transparency, supervision, all of that needed to be strengthened. And I think you highlight an important, again, this is, we see this as a broad Eurozone problem. I mean, Southern Europe borrowed unsustainably, but where did they borrow from? From the banks in Northern Europe. So, the German surpluses got recycled as loans to Southern Europe. So that's why, the imbalances aspect, we see deficits and surpluses, they're two sides of the same coin. But I do think that Greece was a particularly special case. Again, this gets back to the rules issue, and really only Greece that I think was a clear kind of violator of the rules. But the Europeans have stepped up. I mean, the disclosures that they've done under their stress tests have been significant. I mean, there's really no secrets right now about who holds what, including on sovereign derivatives. The EBA just released a bunch of data on that back in November. The stress test got a lot of criticism for not being harsh enough, but I thought that was wrong-headed. I think the real success of the stress test is that they provided a tremendous amount of disclosure at the institution level of European banks, and so I think that's been a huge step forward.
I wonder if I could take that a step further with you, Mr. Ambassador. They're talking about a new fiscal system to make sure the rules are followed. Now, the last fiscal system had rules which couldn't be enforced and not followed. What is it about the new system that will make it more effective?
The new system in Europe, you think?
Yes.
Well, I think just two things. First, I mean, the problem with the sort of the checks and balances that sort of were implemented after the Maastricht Treaty, the Stability Pact, was it was only politically binding, and then it was sort of actually broken by Germany and by France, and thereby sort of was basically shelved. So this new fiscal pact, we are hopefully getting into course. I think that will be signing in a month or two. There you actually put some instruments in the hand of the institutions in Europe in terms of sanctions against member states who does not live up to the criteria. So you have some instruments, and it will not be sort of a political decision, but more an economic fiscal decision whether or not. So I think actually that instrument is going to be worked on. On the question of the banks, I think this same problem we have with the austerity and the consolidation we're going through. You have this situation, you are damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, in the sense that, I mean, everybody expects us now to go through all the things we said we did, but at the same time we all know that if we do that, then at the end of that road it will be more difficult to create growth and so forth. And, I mean, in the perfect world it would be nicer to have a longer landing stretch than we have now, and be able to now take a decision to maybe postpone some of the measures. The same goes for so-called Basel III, which is, of course, we want to put in place a system whereby we can avoid what happened over here in 2008, further down the road. So we need to come up with new financial regulations. This means that banks have to live up to new criteria, and that's actually maybe not the right time to do that because we are in the middle of this crisis, but it has to be done in order to avoid that would happen in the future.
Yeah, I would just say also, what's interesting too is if you look at the banks in Southern Europe, they're actually other than being sort of hostage to the condition of their sovereign, they themselves didn't do anything that got themselves in trouble. It was the vulnerable banks are actually mainly in the northern part of the Eurozone, where they relied much more heavily on external wholesale funding and had incredible amounts of leverage in their balance sheets. And so, again, we try to look at, there's plenty of blame to go around. It's not just, the Southern Europeans that need to make reforms and corrections and all this. And in terms of the governance, one thing that, a lot of the focus has been on the fiscal rules, and I think it's definitely necessary. But I think, again, I would ask the question, would it have made a difference in Spain and Ireland if all the fiscal compact rules would have been in place? I don't think so. That's why I think the imbalances monitoring, which the Commission has proposed and is trying to enforce, may be the more important new governance arrangement. Now, they're getting a lot of resistance from Germany, who doesn't want criticism of their surpluses. And I think, for the imbalances monitoring to be really effective, it has to be, you have to look at persistent deficits and persistent surpluses and what you can do to adjust those.
One of you said that Chancellor Merkel has said that what Europe needs is more Europe in order to sustain an economic and monetary union, but there doesn't seem to be any disposition on the part of the German people and people in many other countries in Europe, I dare say the stronger economic ones like Netherlands, Finland, and maybe even Denmark, to have more Europe. To have a viable economic and monetary union with such income disparities as we see, that people have to consent to massive transfers of resources from the richer parts to the poorer parts. It's something the United States did a long time ago, but probably wouldn't do today if the issue were posed. If the people in Connecticut knew how much it cost them to sustain people in Mississippi, they might be unhappy. So how are you going to overcome these basic obstacles to a viable economic and monetary union?
On the first point that you made, just in my own country, I'm not sure that what you actually said reflects reality in Denmark. We have a debate about should we or should we not be part of this fiscal pact that is more Europe because it will give more instruments to Brussels. And the government, I think, will come around to saying yes once they have gone through the motions of looking at do we need a referendum? In the Danish public opinion, I think around 65% supports Denmark's participation in this. So this means there is a public support for going down this road of more Europe, which is, and I think that is the case in other countries as well. I know there are some populist parties who are having a feast in some European countries because of this, but they're not going to be the majority. They are not at the moment. So I think the politicians, if they take it step by step, as we always do now, will be able to also have the public support for the measures taken. I don't see just around the corner that you have a monetary economic union in the sense that you have here where you have the whole, you look at the US economy as a US economy. That will take some more time if it will ever happen in Europe to get to that situation, because we still have different national states. Transfer of funds from one part of Europe to others will be something way down the road in comparison to what is being done in this country. But we already have structural funds in place that is doing a little bit of that, and that will continue. We did a lot with the Eastern European countries over the last 10 years, and also in other areas like Ireland and Portugal. Part of the reason why they are where they are now is because we had a lot of fun coming from the European Union. But I think my point is that there is actually support to go down this road. I think the steps taken is actually, the response is more Europe to the crisis in Denmark. And will also bring Europe out of this crisis. And then after that, we are better shape than we were before.
Can we have a microphone over here?
My question actually is kind of a two-sided question for both of you. I'm interested in the impact of this in southeastern Europe in particular. And I was wondering if Jeff Baker might comment on the Vienna Initiative and the capacity of that process to be able to hold and avoid deleveraging in southeastern Europe. And my other concern related to this is that, you know, in the event that these banks, given the fact that Eurozone banks own so much in southeastern Europe, if they should deleverage, the impact of this on the whole accession process, because we know that many of the countries that are hoping to accede to the EU are in fact putting through a lot of reforms as a result of that process. I think the Prime Minister from Montenegro commented that they accomplished 10 years of reforms in 1 year because of the carrot of EU accession. And perhaps you might comment on the impact of the Eurozone crisis in terms of southeastern Europe as well, the accession process.
Yeah, so the Vienna Initiative, you know, for those of you who may not be as familiar, initially the crisis, I guess, was in Central and Eastern Europe, and there was a concern that given the where there were also very large external imbalances that had been built up, there was a concern that particularly the Western European banks, which tended to dominate a lot of the banking sectors in Central Southeast Europe, would sort of engage in a disorderly sort of withdrawal from those markets, kind of a rush to the exit, if you will. And I think in a particularly sort of enlightened you know, moment of sort of policy making, they got the banks and the regulators and the international financial institutions all got together and basically said, look, this is kind of the classic sort of prisoner dilemma. If you guys all stay in, you'll be fine. And I think the banks recognized that that's right. And so when they could all kind of agree in front of each other, they ended up maintaining their exposures, and I think that had a huge impact in sort of helping to stabilize the financial systems in Southeast Europe. But I think you're exactly right. Now they're faced with another sort of deleveraging, but from a slightly different reason, because the concern is the home market, not the subsidiary market. In fact, a lot of the profitability now for these Western European banks are from the recoveries in Central and Eastern Europe. Talk to a Greek banker; all their profits are coming out of their investments in the Balkans right now, and so I think it's the southeastern European regulators that are worried now that again they're going to withdraw liquidity to sort of protect the home market. And I think this time though the cooperation of the home market regulators is going to be a little trickier, because I think they're being faced with the situation of, do we have a credit crunch in our home market, or do we export it to somewhere else and it's someone else's problem? And so I think a Vienna Initiative actually, again, could be very important to help check, I think, some of those incentives of the home market regulators. You know, I mean, we've already heard it, like, I think the Austrian regulators started saying, well, you need to start cutting back on Central and Eastern Europe. So I think, once again, the EBRD and the international financial institutions are trying to get some kind of understanding, and that'll be very important. But you're right, the deleveraging and you know, creating a credit crunch is something we're very very concerned about.
On the accession or enlargement process of the European Union, I mean, this is one of the great tools that we have in Europe to continue to export our values and our way of organizing our societies to our borders and beyond our borders, and that has worked very well for many years, and we continue down that road. I mean, as you have seen, Croatia just had a referendum, decided to join the Union, so we will go from 27 to 28 by July, I think, of 2013. We have discussions internally in the Union now about candidates, whether Serbia, how quickly we can go forward with Serbia, so they are next in line, and so is Montenegro. We have a little bit of a name problem, as you know, with Fyrom or Macedonia, but I'm sure that will be solved as well. And they're going through the same reforms that other countries have done before they joined the EU. So I would say this, in my view, the crisis that we're faced with now doesn't have a negative impact on the pace that we're going forward in that direction. And we have the Icelandic ambassador here. Iceland suddenly started being interested in becoming members of the European Union, and there's a process now in that regard as well. So it has, I mean, Europe is attractive for many reasons to those outside Europe. And I think seen from inside the European Union, I mean, we're not finished with enlarging Europe until all of Europe is part of Europe.
There was a question over here on the left.
Yes, can I just speak without the microphone?
Sir, we have this
Oh,
lady
okay.
locked on, so you can go third up.
Oh,
We
can
have a
I?
gentleman over here.
Yeah, but I just want to make it quick. I didn't know that we have to wait for the
I'll refer to
microphone.
lady here from Sicily.
Yeah, can
Ma'am,
I
go
just
ahead.
ask a question?
Ma'am, please, go ahead.
I have a question for Ambassador Taxo Jensen. Europe and more Europe. Would you please remind us why some countries like United Kingdom and Denmark and Switzerland are not part of the European Eurozone? Thank you.
Switzerland is not part of the European Economic and Monetary Union because they're not part of the European Union yet. Denmark, back in 1992, when we were looking at the Maastricht Treaty, had a referendum about whether we should join the treaty or not, and the Danish electorate voted no. So the government went back, scratched their heads, and came up with 4 exceptions. So we actually negotiated with the union at the time 4 exceptions for our membership. One was we're not participating in defense, in police, we don't want the euro, and the 4th one was we don't want to be European citizens.